All right, welcome everybody to another venue webinar. We're going to concentrate on S6L today and its use in immersive systems. Today we're going to have a guest in, and we're going to do a little case study today. We're going to kind of, we've been talking about immersive in the lab and a few other places, and it's kind of a great talking point in the industry right now. And it's kind of nice to go out and see it actually in play somewhere and actually get all of that, in play and let you see it all and let you see that it's actually real out in the world. There are actually people that are doing it, and it's a pretty exciting time. So I'm going to invite in my guest here today. My guest is John Cornelius. He is the tech director at Orchard Hill Church. So we're going to spend a little time just getting to know each other here a little bit, and then we'll go through some pictures and kind of talk you through the system. As you can see, he's got that beautiful background there. That's not a green screen, right, John?
No, I'm at front of house, and that's the speakers behind me. So
that's right. That's the real thing. All right. So let's get started here. Start off, John. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, what's your background in audio? How'd you get kind of hooked up with Orchard Hill, et cetera? Give us 20,000 foot flyby there, and let us know where you came from.
Yeah, cool. I went to school here in Pittsburgh at Duquesne University, studied audio recording. Fast forward a handful of years, I was chasing my wife. She worked at this church. She knew I did some audio. I did some freelance work for them, and then after about 3 months, I got hired. It was early in 2000, and I've been here ever since. So that's how I got hooked up here at the church, and a little bit of my audio background. So, but the church here is Orchard Hill Church. We're about 20 to 30 minutes north of the city center of Pittsburgh. We have two off-site campuses, and one in Butler, a little north of here, one in the city. This serves as the broadcast kind of origination point for those two places. We do the video teaching there, and it's been a great organization to be a part of, and just did a big remodel, which is, I guess, why we're here today.
Yeah. So, I was looking at your website. It looked like, are you at the modern looking facility? The place, a couple of the other buildings that I saw looked like they had been around for a long time. I mean, very traditional looking church buildings, but the building you're in now is more
Correct.
of a modern kind of, I go here easily, performing arts style building, right?
Totally, yeah. I mean, this the architect for this building in 1997 was a theater architect. It is a theater in how it's laid out and presented. It has a 250 seat balcony, has about 800 seats on the floor. So it, and that way it is kind of like a performing arts space. And actually, that was a large part of why this remodel even came to be. Is originally it was very, very much as theater. It was laid out, straight rows, and both here on the floor and the balcony. And then we wanted to basically increase focus in all ways, both video, audio, lighting, anything that we could do. We wanted to, that was kind of the overarching big goal of this. So we did that through seating, and then, immersive finally matured enough, and that ended up being something that ended up being intriguing, explored, and then ended up executing here in this.
Right. So I noticed I thought I heard you say you'd been there since 2000. Is that right? So you've been with the church for 20 years or so?
A little over 20 years, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. How long has the actual church organization been going?
The church was founded in 1989. Had a smaller building on the same property here a while ago, in an A-frame type building. Yeah, it built this facility originally in 1997, and then I would say, at least from the auditorium perspective here, we took it down to the walls and redid everything. So that just happened here, 20 years later from the original. And the original installation was decent. At the time it was pretty state of the art. It's just, 20-year systems, kind of
Sure.
needed to be updated a little bit later.
So obviously you're immersive in the new space there. Are you considering adopting that into your other rooms as well?
Probably not in the near future. Both those facilities are about 200 seat, more traditional spaces. So I don't know if that would probably apply quite as well in those particular venues.
Yeah. Well, great. I mean, that sounds really cool. So let's talk maybe a little bit about maybe just talk about your presentations there a little bit. I mean, obviously it's a church. We know you're going to have spoken word. That's a given in all of the places. But you obviously do music there as well. Are there other types of presentation that you think are served by the immersive format there, or is it primarily spoken word and music?
Yeah, that's 98% of what we're doing is, more of a modern worship service where we have, about 20 minutes to a half hour worth of music presentation, worship at the front half of the service, about a 35-minute spoken word message at the end. Sometimes it's, we mix up that format a little bit, but that's what we're doing here. Although occasionally there's a couple Christian schools in the area that we sometimes offer up our facility to use. They know they'll be here in a few weeks doing their end of year concerts and stuff like that, that we also support in the community.
Right. So I noticed you have, your main sanctuary there. Do you have also have like, student ministries, et cetera? Is there PA needs, et cetera, in those other areas? Yes. Do you guys do that as well?
We have just about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, we opened up a small 300-seat chapel because, a room like this doesn't necessarily do great for smaller life events like weddings, funerals, stuff like that, while the awesome as this room is. So we made a little smaller 300 shape, a little bit of a fan-shaped room. Again, at that time, immersive wasn't in my brain, so it's a little more of a LCR kind of or a distributed kind of setup. Yeah. But I would say at least that, you get back to your original question, whatever maybe consider immersive in that room, maybe down the road. But
well, speaking of that, I mean, how many? And we'll keep this to audio here. How many audio staff people do you have working at the church, or at this facility, I should say?
I'd say here I have 3 people on staff. We all kind of do a little bit of everything. But there's another woman here, Sarah, who does some of the other mixing responsibilities here at front house for the most part. And then we also have a handful of volunteers that fill the need from time to time. And then there's a 3rd technical staff, but he focuses mostly on the video side of things.
Right. Okay. Well, let's dig in here a little bit, and we'll get to. We got a little bit of a picture gallery of your space there, so let's have a look at what you got going on there. It looks beautiful. All right. So let's do here. All right. So this is just kind of a side view of your sanctuary there. I got to tell you, I mean, aesthetically, it's absolutely stunningly beautiful. I mean, just great looking facility. You. Nice, open, bright. It looks like a lot of acoustic work done there as well, right? You want to give a shout out to your contractor or your integrator and the acoustics? Yeah.
So actually, I don't remember the acoustician at the moment. I'd have to look at my notes, but
nobody ever remembers them unless they're really bad.
Exactly. That's actually a good picture of the space. We wanted to do. Obviously, audio is a big part of this project. So we wanted to do everything we could to both increase the audience participation and have really great coverage. Again, the immersive fit that bill really well. We can talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, spent a decent amount of time. Those ceiling clouds were made very intentionally to, although it is a high ceiling, trying to do as much as we could to direct as much audience energy back to them. And then with anything that the PA or the stage put forward, hopefully that would either get diffused or absorbed as much as possible without making the room feel unusually or obnoxiously dead. So
right. Yeah, I was so glad to see churches go back to that a little bit, trying to make the room more live for the congregation. I even noticed your seating and stuff has all hard backing, soft fronts, things like that to really help that situation.
Yep.
Here's kind of a look at your stage, which again, very clean, very beautiful looking. All right, so let's get to the kind of the heart of the matter here. Let's talk about your PA system. So
sure.
You've had, you're using L-Acoustics,
yep.
Right, with L-ISA. Is that correct?
Correct, yep.
All right, so I've kind of taken the liberty, I haven't confirmed this with you, but I'm going to kind of outline these arrays and you can describe them for you.
Sure.
So this looks like the primary front field of your immersive. Is that correct?
Right. The 5 in the center, from how L-Acoustic calls it, to do L-ISA, you need to at least have those 5 arrays in the middle. That's your scene system. The 2 smaller arrays to the far outsides are what they call extensions.
Right.
And in that, mostly, I'm not putting a whole lot of stuff out there other than to create space and effects. My reverbs sometimes go out that far, but I'm not necessarily putting instrumentation too much in that. That's just to kind of give a nice widening kind of perspective to the whole thing.
Right. And you correct me if I'm wrong. You only have front field immersive right here. You're not doing a full surround or anything. Okay.
Nope, just the front field.
Yeah. And then after that is your subwoofer system. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. And it might just tell us what boxes you're using as well. Can you describe the boxes throughout?
So in the 3 center arrays, those are L-Acoustics A15s. The rest of the arrays are L-Acoustics A10s. I am going to embarrassingly not know the subs right at the second.
Okay.
Other than, we went back and forth, of 2 or whether we can have 4 or 6, and it shows for the extra headroom, because we could, or that was important to basically make sure we were working inside the comfortable range of both the speakers and the amplifiers. So while we don't run the SPL that the system can put out, we just made sure to have a nice amount of headroom on that. So
the thing that's nice here, and I try to point this out every time I see it with immersive because it's a big deal, is everybody who's watching should actually take note of this, that there are no speakers hanging down into the video screens. Yep. There's no banana hanging in front of the video screens, right? And I'm gonna predict that that's good for every seat in the house, right? There's no video screen obstruction.
Yeah, of course. Even immersive suited this exceptionally well because it was a piece of cake. We could kind of put the PA where we wanted to. We could put the screens where we wanted to. It was a little bit more of a dance early on in the project. Only at the beginning of 2019 is when I experienced L-ISA or immersive for the first time. And we started the project in 2018, and we're really far down the road with a traditional left-right set of arrays. I even figured out all the sight lines with that, but it definitely was much more of a dance with a traditional left-right system. So
I mean, anybody who's been in audio for the past 20 years understands the dance that you go through with mechanically articulated arrays and video screens. I mean, it's the challenge of all challenges, right?
Yep.
Let's see what else you got here. So I was going to ask about this. I didn't ask you about this the other day when we were on the phone, but I'm going to ask you about it now. So
sure.
Are these little, the ones that are surrounded in turquoise there, are those a downfill?
Yeah, they're just a monofill. There were just a few, and I would say maximum like 30 to 50 seats combined, just that were outside of the main coverage pattern of the PA. So felt it necessary to put those there. They're not doing a ton of work, but it is important for those seats pretty far to the outside on the wings. So,
and in terms of the feed that is going there, is that a kind of flattened mono, or is it a spatialized mono?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's just a flattened mono. And again, it's just to fill in just a handful of seats.
Right. And then I'm going to actually drop down here because I kind of noticed this morning. Is this a front fill system that is built in there?
Yes, that is just a front fill system. It is not an immersive front fill. Right. At the time of the design of this, that wasn't completely available with L-ISA. There were, I think you can get it now.
That's correct. Yeah.
It increases the cost a good bit. And I would have loved to have done that. But at this point, I think it's just maybe 3 or 4 different zones of a mono, flattened mono.
It's cool though. Looks good. All right. Let me see if I got any other questions to go through here. So, I noticed I may end up jumping around here a little bit asking some of these questions, but I noticed that you got your drum kit off to one side of the stage. And I honestly, I see this more in churches than anywhere. Are you using immersive to localize that drum kit in that position, or in terms of mix, are you presenting it in the center of the room?
It's not necessarily localized as far off stage as that is, but it is edged towards that. The kick and the snare are actually between scenes 3 and 4. So they present, about where the subwoofers are. Also, when L-Acoustics was here and, giving me some tips and tricks on that, they actually, at least Josh recommended putting your low frequency information between those first and the center and the outside array, because then you actually get the 15s on both of those arrays working together and fully, and you actually get a little more impact that way than trying to just jam it up the middle. So in that way too, the bass guitar is actually shifted a little far off to the left there. And while it is not truly centered, for the most part, you don't necessarily feel that too much. The tom-tom hit on the rack tom, which ends up being presenting house right a little bit. He probably ends up feeling a little towards the screen. So in that way, it's a little hyped to the outside. But yeah, I am presenting it a little bit off to the right to kind of because I can, and I'm doing as much as I can actually from a mix perspective overall to just try to get things, if they're maybe not totally perfect, but you're trying to get them that they present acoustically where they're positioned on stage, which I think is one of the beautiful things about immersive.
I totally agree with you there. And, you know, I say this just from going to churches and helping them out and dealing with this situation in stereo. It's one of the hardest things to deal with in stereo when you got your acoustic drum kit off to one side of the stage and are having to compete with that acoustic energy with a stereo PA system. And where do you put the drum kit? You know, it's tough. And I'm with you. I think, you know, immersive, especially front field immersive object mixing almost solves that problem. I mean, you can make it so believable that the kid is coming from there. You know, it's really, really great.
Yep.
I'm a big fan. So in terms of spoken word, you know, I'm going to guess that your pastor works primarily down center.
Yep.
Does he move, you know, enough for you to warrant you having a tracker, or does he work from a podium or anything like that?
My pastor does move enough to probably warrant a tracker. So far, we haven't explored that. You know, as in many projects like this, you know, you're doing gives and takes on all sorts of things. And
sure.
The tracking is something I left on the ground for now. I look forward to experimenting that. But even with, I would say what I have chosen very intentionally to do with that, even though he does move around, probably if you see the 4 footlights there, he works between the outside of those and the inside of those outside 2 footlights. I've placed him fairly center and fairly narrow because again, actually, when I experienced this for the first time in L-Acoustics demo room, granted the point that the demo was music, but when they switched from stereo to L-ISA, what was the most remarkable thing to me is the vocal all of a sudden became extremely, extremely centered, and it blew me away. Yeah. And now, of course, that felt wonderful for the music, and I thought, oh, you know, creatively, that was, wow, look at the possibilities. But also, too, I almost immediately thought, too, this is wonderful because now, of course, we have screens, we have cameras, we have lights. We can, you know, you could try to do what you can visually to support the pastor being centered. But now, for the first time ever, other than hanging a center array just for speech, which, you know, plenty of churches have done that have the budget and the time for it. Now that to have the spoken word presentation to emanate from center, it's been amazing to notice how many people, also accentuated by the wrap that we did with the seats, but less people are watching pastor on iMag than were before. Because even when people would, you know, be seeing that right section, when we had straight oriented seating, you know, they would look at that screen off to the right. And also that's because the sound was coming from over there as well.
Right,
so
right.
So now that you can take, what's exciting to me about immersive, and especially since for churches, because, you know, we spend more of our time generally in spoken word than we do in music. So nailing that part of your presentation is extremely, extremely important. So now to be able to use audio to direct people's attention, that was what sold immersive the most for me when I experienced it in the demo room.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. The very first times that I experienced immersive in that setting, and it was with a spoken word, it wasn't necessarily in a church setting, but it was in a corporate kind of setting. I just remember having this overwhelming sense of, wow, this is the solution for the churches. This is the solution for the churches, because it's that best hybrid of kind of stereo music concepts, you know, positional music concepts, and spoken word. I mean, why would you ever go to these, you know, center clusters strictly for vocal and stereo just for music when you have this kind of thing at your option now? You know, it just seems so perfectly suited for that workflow. I was very happy to see it. I just remember thinking, wow, this is it. We made it. All right, let's move on a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about your interface here. This looks like some racks in your machine room.
Yep.
Looks like a couple of L-ISA processors up there, which I didn't take the time to highlight. I apologize for that. And then a Wave sound grid server. That looks like a Stage 64 there, and your engine. I noticed your engine is remotely located there, right? So
Yes.
It's not at your front of house position. That's great. That's kind of a neat thing. It's kind of unique to Avid console designs that we can separate that engine from the surface like that. So that's cool. So what are you actually using? I noticed that the engine is here and the L-ISA processors are here. So I'm going to make this assumption. Are you driving L-ISA with MADI?
Yes.
With MADI cards right from that engine? Is that the idea?
Correct. Yeah. Everything is MADI to the L-ISA, and then of course from the L-ISA. And I think that at this point, that's all L-Acoustics has to offer, although I hear networked solutions are in the future.
Yeah.
So yeah, all MADI. And then above the L-ISA controller, that's kind of a little bit of the heartbeat of it all, is that Avitran audio toolbox. That's doing a lot of format conversion for us. So getting the MADI to AVB for the L-Acoustics amplification so that, that was actually, we spent so many months with trying to figure out how to, get MADI in and then get to the AVB. And then I wanted to get we have some other facilities that have some Dante in it. So being able to move audio around the facility fairly effortlessly, wanted to have some sort of, small amount of Dante IO to do. So again, using that audio toolbox ended up being the perfect tool for the job, as opposed to having 3, 4, 5 different pieces of, don't get me wrong, RME, Focusrite makes some really great options, but do the whole channel count that I was looking to do, that got pretty costly fast. So
yeah, I mean, it's great that you were able to find a solution here. I think there's a lot of really good stuff on the horizon right now for you to do those very things. It's just right around the corner. I mean, just a lot of companies, Avid included, now supporting Milan. A lot of these processors are going to support Milan now, so it's going to be a really great way to do it.
This installation will be way easier in about 1 to 2 years.
That's right. Well put. All right, let's see. Let's move on here. Maybe what do we get next? Oh, and I didn't know you were incorporating Stage 32s, but it looks like you have Stage 32s in a couple of locations as well, right?
Yeah. So on stage, IO is basically handled by the Stage 32s. Most of the while I would have loved to have also updated my wireless, which is in a different rack there, I still have a decent amount of analog wireless. So that's what that Stage 64 is taking in, mostly on the analog side, on the inputs, and then the outputs in that rack room are serving as the front end for our live mix, Digital Audio Labs personal monitoring system. So, basically all the stage IO is handled between those Stage 32s, and then at least on the stage right one, have one output card just for utility when you need to get something out there.
Yeah, it looks great. So you got 3 IO nodes on this system then, a Stage 64 and 2 Stage 32s, right?
Correct. Yep.
Right. All right, and here is your gorgeous front of house position. So you're on stage S6L32D there, and you're mixing front of house and monitors from this position, right? As well as doing the immersive thing.
Yes. So yep. We're using, like many churches, we're using a personal monitoring system. In our case, it's Digital Audio Labs Live Mix. Again, the analog front end for that is in the rack room. Was going to be digital, but then again, had so many different digital formats in and out that eventually was like, okay, it's actually easy. Did the latency calculations on the analog stuff. It was going to be similar to all the digital format conversions, because I had to knock it down to 48K and a couple other things like that. So yeah, I have most, either the personal monitoring system has kind of dealt with some direct outs for individual channels, and then auxiliaries that doing stems and submixes to fit inside that 24 input format for the folks on stage.
Right. So are you doing are you duplicating inputs on the console per se, and making like a set of monitor inputs and then a set of inputs that drive through objects to the immersive?
So with the immersive, I've just because this is where L-Acoustics steered me initially, and I've only been at this about 3 months, I'll probably start to work on some bus paths for the immersive, but right now I'm 100% object based. So then having to deal with monitor inputs then meant just duplicating an input and providing a direct output to the stage 64 for monitoring. But initially bought the 112 engine, upgraded to a 144 to get the extra channel count to make some of that possible. But it's actually been working out great.
That's such a great workflow in digital, especially for mixing front of house and monitors, just to quickly, immediately be able to, duplicate and triplicate channels as needed for monitors. It's just an absolute lifesaver in that situation. So you got your handful out there. Doing front of house mix, monitor mix.
Well, the monitor thing, it gets pretty easy because, at the end of the day, you provide 24 inputs or stems to the musicians. They kind of take care of themselves at that point. What's wonderful about, S6L, and I would even say it's, the workflow of the desk, I just have a layout that's all the monitor stuff. It just presents on one input, when I need to get to that, press a button, you're there. Everything's right in front of me. It's, just a piece of cake to kind of deal with. So
right.
Once I figured out the patching, it was easy to execute.
And are you using, I'm going to guess you're taking advantage of the L-ISA plugin that runs on S6L, right?
Yep. I'm not using it I early on, put it on a lot of things and then realized I wasn't touching it on some things, but mostly on vocals and then some guitars and stuff like that I maybe want to move around from time to time, depending on the band.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. A lot of people don't realize that, they think, well, if I'm going to use objects with S6L, I have to have the plugin on. And you don't necessarily. The only reason you have the plugin on the console is so that you have access to remotely control that position of that object within the L-ISA software, right? So as long as you have a direct out or any output path available for it, you can use it as an object in L-ISA.
Yep.
How about, speaking of that, how about a virtual sound check, right? Are you doing, you're using virtual sound check? You got a recorder set up there and using that to, set some of your positioning in the immersive field?
Yep. I have a Mac Mini hidden in here that's that I remote into to get started, stopped. But I've actually was on Profile before this for at least 10 to 12 years. So was well familiar with virtual sound check. And I would say it was a security blanket in this conversion, because we actually, no construction project ends when you want it to. Our first weekend was the first week of December. And of course, Christmas was right on its heels. We do a fairly decent size production. So I had to get spun up and comfortable on this fast. So, there was a lot of, we got through that first weekend, which was a little bit of a run and gun. And then, and beautifully then now had a pile of tracks to deal with, and then spend a decent amount of time just working in the shed, basically just trying to learn. Guys from L-Acoustics mixed the first night, I did the second night, and then after that it was like thrown in the deep end. So then it was wonderful. Virtual soundcheck was tremendous for helping me get comfortable as fast as I could, because I didn't have to experiment with an audience all the time.
Well, what you just described there is a textbook use case for virtual sound check, right? That's exactly why it's around, to help that sort of thing. And I personally think it's going to be totally invaluable in immersive setups, where you're, maybe doing design, presenting ideas to an artist, or, even a senior staff, et cetera.
Totally.
To get them to understand what's going on, let alone be able to practice with it. And because, immersive in terms of output structure is way more complex than a traditional left-right. So, you don't necessarily want to be experimenting during the event,
Well, I had a great example of that I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where watching one of your labs, I had a couple ideas I wanted to goof around with and, experiment with for 2 or 3 hours. And some of it worked, some of it didn't, for at least how I wanted to work. And got to the end of it and was like, well, I'm not going to keep this, but the exercise was very important and I learned a lot. So even though I didn't necessarily keep all of it. So,
well, virtual sound checks is important to learn what you shouldn't do as well as
totally
what you should do. Let's see. I'm going to assume you're up on Venue 7. Are you on Venue 7 software at this point?
Actually, same thing. Unfortunately, we launched in December and, was trying to learn a bunch of stuff. I and when you guys, I can't remember when you dropped Venue 7, it was kind of mid-December.
December, yeah.
I desperately wanted to go to it, but since I was in the middle of basically a 3-week production, it didn't feel wise to switch over. But I was looking forward to so many things, and I would say especially the tool that I've used. The one feature that was in Venue 7 that I probably latched onto the most is the parallel paths on individual channels. Because I'm doing immersive and because I've abandoned much of my bus workflow for parallel compression, say for instance drums or stuff like that, or let's use that as an example. I'm doing that on a per channel base now because I am also presenting those inputs to the PA as individual sources too. So the parallel compression or the parallel processing on the channels has been a wonderful thing to get the sounds I was still trying to get, but without having to, at least at this point, do it through a bus. Again, I'm still a baby in this, and I may end up going to a bus path for drums down the road. But right now, I'm kind of giddy on the power of being able to place things individually, and it's just kind of fun and exciting to experiment with.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you latched on to the parallel compression, and just maybe for people that don't know it, I'll explain it. There is the ability on SXL now with Venue 7 on every input and every output to parallel compress on the channel, and you do it with a blending knob, a 50-50 knob. It can be any ratio you want, so you can have parallel compression, parallel gating, even parallel equalization, which kind of works as a scaler on the EQ. So you have that available to you on every input and output. So your ability to parallel process is greatly enhanced quickly in Venue 7. You can do it very, very quickly, very simply. And that actually kind of drives me to another question here, John. Actually, let me just get through the slide here real quick and make sure we're okay. Yeah, I kind of missed this. This is that's obviously the L-ISA plugin operating on Venue on S6L there on the left. And that is one of your live mix artist controllers on the right. Is that right?
Yep.
So
correct.
So it looks like the artist control thing is that 24 sources. Can you take into that? Is that right?
Correct. 24 sources. And then actually it actually serves two people, as you probably see there on the top. There's an A and a B side. So I would say it's a nice thing about the product. It also can be a bad thing about the product if your artists aren't being careful, because all of a sudden, Joe takes care of what Tom was hearing. But generally, after 1 or 2 times around with volunteers, they eventually get the hang of that, so that they're not wrecking other people's mixes.
Right.
But it's a great space saver on stage, because no one necessarily likes to see those things either. So being able to serve 2 artists from one box is pretty keen. So
so kind of going back to your some of the earlier pictures, I noticed there were keyboard on stage and your drums on stage. Is that the only live instrumentation on stage? Is there any amplifiers, anything like that going on?
No, great question. We just completely shifted over now to where we have a couple house ones. The main guitarist and music director here has got into Kempers, and he has one, and then we have now a house one. So those have been wonderful. So before we had a room off stage where I would run guitar cabinets too. So we'd have some heads on stage and run long cables too. But yeah, we've been fortunate. I've been able to work with a fairly clean stage, both from acoustic sources and from not having large amplifier stacks or anything like that.
Yeah, those Kemper models are just ridiculously good. I am so blown away by that box. So
it's also nice too, because at least for where we are here, and we're just starting to get into that. And actually, in our broadcast room, I have a little rig set up for them for the guitarists. For the folks that are used to having amplifiers and don't have a Kemper at home. What we're going to work to do over the next several months is just, bring their amps in, model them so that they're, working with something on that feels like home to them. And so that's, hopefully not an obstacle to them, switching over and being like, no, I need to use my head. So
that's so great. I mean, I just think back to where we were even 10 years ago with this kind of stuff, man. I mean, good grief, it comes so far here. So great. Let's, kind of speaking of your broadcast area, let's have a quick look at that. So you have a second S6L that is in a broadcast zone.
Yep.
Looks like it's a 24C. So just walk us through that. Walk us through what you're doing with that every week.
Well, it's funny. This was a late add to this project, but as you know, we've been here with COVID for a year. Basically, the initial scope of the project was basically like deal with the in-person experience. So while we were already streaming a little bit, of course, like every other church on earth, COVID hit. Now streaming became the thing. So, so to make the broadcast, the audio side of that better, we at the very last minute. I mean, I think we purchased this in mid-November and designed this part and added this on. So yeah, chose a 24C because there's no reason to, love the Venue platform, no reason to go away from it. IO sharing, all those things that are great. And then,
so you guys are using input sharing and gain tracking with those two systems? Yeah,
absolutely. And then also, we're still, again, we're 3 months in. Again, we're still a little COVID. We are not fully utilizing this broadcast room quite yet because, having, but that needs to be a volunteer position for us, and getting people spun up on that, and that people that are actually really good at that are some of our more cautious health perspective folk. So as vaccines are rolling out, we're going to be able to utilize this room a little more fully. But yeah, using the gain tracking, and then also bought an additional MADI card for the front of house S6Ls to pass audio between the two desks. So down the road might work into, maybe doing some stem mixing from front of house to see if they want to accept that, or, as we learn how to leverage that room better.
Yeah. Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, that's very, very cool, man. Looks really, really great. So let's, let's just jump into a little bit of discussion here about, and again, I think this is where things like immersive and, the technology that we have now actually complement each other so well. I mean, it's not lost on anybody that certainly even at the mixer level, we have a complexity going on in digital mixing today that is really kind of startling. And, you work in an environment, obviously, that takes advantage of volunteers at times, and may not have the most experienced staff working the console at times. So my question to you really kind of boils down to this. Do you think this combination of digital mixing and immersive object-based mixing, do you think that has simplified it for everybody? It is my sense that it has, and should actually make it easier for someone to walk up and kind of get sounds and get going. Do you agree with that? You think that's the way we're heading?
I do. And again, because of COVID, we haven't necessarily fully leaned into volunteers with this setup yet. We will be getting there very soon. I look forward to equipping volunteers or exposing volunteers that mix, because again, but you said that well, with digital mixing systems, especially if you start to use bus processing, those things can become very hidden, and people lean into a bus processor or compressor or something too hard, and they can't necessarily tell why what's happening is happening. So with the object-based and immersive, it's the fader is kind of, it's pretty much all there on the fader.
Right. Right. That's kind of where I was heading with it. You push up a fader, you hear something.
Right.
That's got to be liberating to some degree for people that are new to it, Right.
Or if you're like, here, oh, that's overly compressed. Well, it's going to be right in front. It's going to be one of those things that's right in front of you on the strip.
In front of you. Yeah.
So that part is really great. And then just from once, it takes a afternoon to kind of, wrap your head around how this, this is working. Well, I'm not assigning it to a left-right bus and such stuff like that. But the amount of what immersive does with the amount of perceived space you have to mix into, so to speak, is really, really great. Things that take up a lot of space that can, like electric guitars, like I have them on the outsides of the space where I can leave kind of, up the middle pretty open for vocals to, increase. It's just easier to, with all those, even if you have a fairly dense mix with a handful of keyboards, a handful of electric guitars, some tracks, like it's a lot easier to kind of with immersive to find those little spaces to kind of put them into, and because you can make them almost as small as you want in a certain regard, and then if you want to make them huge, you can also do that well and spread them, even a mono source through 3 arrays and through the whatever magic that they're doing there with decorrelation to make that possible. But
yeah, I again, it kind of gets back to my that feeling of, my gosh, this is an incredible solution for churches, where you have, I've been to churches where you might have 6 acoustic guitars on stage, and that idea of being able to easily separate instrumentation and immersive is so prevalent so much more pronounced than it is in a left-right mix. Like being able to create separation in the audio field that is in front of you, that is just so much easier in immersive. So again, for the inexperienced mixer, that's got to be an asset for them to be able to just kind of go, oh, let me put it over here. Let me put it over here.
Well,
yeah, I can hear those, blah, blah, blah.
But also, we're about 2-3 months into this, the musicians that serve here and, while they're not on stage, many of them have come up to me and it's like, they're just blown away with how well you can pick out the different parts of a mix, and immersive, feeds into that really, really well. And then even people that don't have the language for that, even I got a text after the last service last Sunday, where they sat in the balcony and they're just like, basically all they can say is it was so clear. That's about the only language they can come up with for that, which is great. But it is overwhelmingly, people have definitely noticed the difference. They're blown away. And yeah, one of the musician people even came up to me 2 weekends ago. He's like, wow, the decay on the cymbals is amazing. I'm like, you're even paying attention to that? I was like, oh,
see, good. At least he didn't say, how come the cymbals are so loud? I can't hear the vocal, right?
Yeah.
That's the one. All right. Well, John, this has been fantastic, man. I mean, congratulations to you guys for pulling together such a great looking system there. And I'm so glad you're having such great success with it. I think we'll probably take a few minutes here and maybe we'll open up to some Q&A and see if my compadres in the background have any questions.
Hey guys, that was awesome.
Chat.
Hey man. Yeah, there's a few questions that came in, and I'll just throw them out there. John will be able to answer most of them. I'm assuming.
I would prefer that John answer most of them. So,
so we'll start with the first one. Did you need speakers under the balcony for this?
Yes, actually, that's a good question. What was wonderful about moving to immersive was the how it did change the fill systems. Yes, it was necessary. I'm right at the edge of the balcony right now. It's not exceptionally deep. We did need some under balcony filled. It's for people that maybe were hanging out on the back wall the last row or two. But when we were with the traditional lift right away, to cover well in the balcony, we did have a ring of smaller speakers to do balcony fill. Once we switched to, and this is actually why even immersive was a little bit possible, because at least the L-Acoustics solution, we lost a lot of speakers and amplifiers that we were doing for fill because the main immersive system covered all that well. So that was one of the things that at least immersive made the PA deployment in a certain regard simpler, even though it's not completely simple. But overwhelmingly what you see on the picture there is what, those 7 arrays are doing 98% of the work. There's a little bit of front fill, there's a little bit under balcony fill, but on the far outsides of the rooms, they're being covered by those main front arrays.
Nice, very cool.
Nice stuff.
Let's see. Why fly the subs instead of them being under the stage? Robert's
a better systems guy than I am on this, but so I'll do my best, and then he can say what I said wrong. I think how L-Acoustics would answer that is it just keeps all the timing together there, so that again, I don't know, don't have the language for this very well, but everything in L-Acoustics L-ISA system is pretty much timed to that center array, and then everything kind of emanates or works out from there. So having the center array work in tandem with each other, so getting the subwoofers as close as they can to make sure that all the phase and the alignment of that is as tight as possible is where they start. And then we could have, and it was part of an early part of the design, if you'd like to have floor deployed subs, they can work that in. But I think, especially for L-ISA and L-Acoustics is doing almost all of those designs at this point. They're starting to open up to other people, but they really want those subs to be right up against that, either behind or flanking that center array.
Yeah. You're on the mark there, John. I mean, that's essentially what's going on there. Part of the thing you have to remember in immersive, right, is that center array typically is going to carry your power elements, right? It's going to typically carry your drums, your bass, your vocals, etc. And that needs to be of a kind of a magnitude, I guess is the right word to use, maybe not, to compete with what used to be 2 arrays, right? So in terms of its power capability, its output capability, it's got to be able to hang with that. So, that's part of the reason for condensing that speaker system up into that center. But the other piece of it is, and you can do ground fill sub, but it's primarily there to pull attention down, right? So that your attention is not directed up to low frequency. That always feels odd when that is going on. So a lot of, I think in their immersive designs, any PA design, a lot of times you'll put ground fill subs down just to pull attention down, and don't have to be very loud to do it. That's the kind of cool thing about that. They can be down on that ground. You might even cross them over slightly different, so that they're a little more complementary of each other, but just something to get that energy or that focus pulled down for the bottom end. So,
and my experience here has been that even having them flown there, I haven't, even from my perspective, I haven't felt like the low end's coming from up on high. And
yeah.
And I would say from even when I was doing, again, back to when I was just considering a left-right system, I was leaning towards both for space considerations, because we don't have a ton of room under the stage, but I was mostly going to fly the subs anyway, but mostly for coverage reasons.
Yeah. I mean, it does help you. I mean, as we all talk about all the time, audio is just managing your trade-offs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, having those flown subwoofers up there gets you better alignment through the crossover point, no doubt about it, right? And, having them kind of centrally located means your horizontal coverage of that subwoofer energy is going to be really, really good. It's going to have little to no comb filtering in it, no nulls anywhere in the room. So it just translates to, more focus, less cancellations, et cetera. It's a good thing. It's a good thing when it's done right.
Cool. So one more about speakers. I understand you have 3 hangs with A15s, 2 with A10s, but shouldn't all 5 front hangs be identical?
I'll do again. This would be a better L-Acoustics question if there was someone here. Unfortunately, there isn't. But my version of L-ISA is what they call a focus system, where they even the speakers aren't evenly spaced out. Those 3 are a little tighter together. Again, it's a little more to give impact and strength to the center of it, and then is acceptable for the outside arrays to maybe have a little less power. Again, that the whatever magic gnomes they put in that L-ISA controller, they have done a very great job of, even though it goes from a 15 to a 12 on the outside, they've done in their processing, you can move something. Not that you probably want to do this time, but you can move something dynamically into that smaller speaker, and it really doesn't. Sure, it sounds a little bit different. It's almost impossible for it not to, but they've done a wonderful job of making that feel pretty even all the way across the front field, even moving between the smaller and larger arrays.
Nice.
Yeah.
How long have you been mixing now in L-ISA? Sorry, Robert.
That's all right. Go ahead. I'll let you finish it up.
So it was installed on the first weekend of December. So it's about 3 months. And actually we had about 2 or 3 weeks off because we had a little bit of a staff COVID outbreak in early January. So I would say I feel like I'm a baby at this. I'm still learning things every week, every time I'm behind the console. It's been a thrill and a joy to mix on. So I'm only looking forward to making this thing be able to sing even better than it does now. But out of the box, it's been great.
Well, maybe we need to check in with you about every 6 months, John. We'll have you on every 6 months, just kind of check in and take your temperature, see how it's going.
Yeah.
Robert,
cool.
Did you have something to add about the front fill, the 5?
No, that's all right. John covered it well. It's fine.
Okay, that's cool. Very cool. How many objects are you typically mixing during a service?
That's a good question. This weekend will be pretty minimal. And actually, one of the things I'm kind of looking forward to, most of the time we've been doing normal, let's say, call it for lack of a better term, rock show worship. This weekend, we're doing 2 acoustic guitars and a keyboard and a couple vocals. So it would be interesting to mess around with. How does this work? How do I leverage this in a smaller, more intimate kind of setting? So I look forward to that. But I would guess real inputs I'm doing most weekends is probably in the 40 to 50 range. There's a lot more patch to the, for flexibility. And so you don't have to, patch direct outputs all the time. So I have a lot of things on the console that I have every week just so I can patch it quickly and go. But I have in the L-ISA controller, I probably have about 80 of the inputs already kind of soft patched, at least for flexibility's sake, but generally about 40 to 50 inputs probably to the controller per week.
That's good. That's healthy, man. That's a lot.
Very cool. Is the broadcast stereo then? I know you have a separate console setup for that. Are you broadcasting in stereo?
Yeah, correct. That is strictly a stereo setup. That is that mix would go straight to the streaming encoder. So
cool. A couple questions about IEMs. So are you using immersive IEMs? I know you talked a little bit about this, but I want to cover that again.
no,
live mix.
Yeah, the live mix is just a stereo product. It's not, shoot, I can't remember what the immersive offering is. And that'd be a fun thing to mess around with, but so far it's not something. We were already using these systems in our other offsite venues and then our chapel. So kind of stuck with that for just a convenience, and when something goes down, it's easy to swap kind of perspective. And then the other thing about that I like about the at least this offering, not that other manufacturers don't do it, but those mixers, like Robert showed earlier, they have they're just a remote control. Basically, I mean, sure, the audio comes out of it if you're right there, but there's a D to A box that they offer, which you could just assign the output of that mixer to D to A, and then that goes into a PSM 900 wireless system. So some people are, like the drummer or the keyboard, some people that makes sense for it to be wired, but then we have 8 wireless systems that are remote controlled by those, and then get sent to the transmitter there in the rack room with a short cable run. So
great.
Awesome.
It's good stuff, man. Really good.
I don't know how are we doing on time here. Well, we're doing. Okay.
We got a few more minutes here. We can go right to the top of the hour here if you want.
Is the S6L fully loaded? That's one of them.
I have the 144 engine. I only have the one DSP card in it, and then so I'm using some AX plugins. I'm using, obviously we saw the SoundGrid server. I'm using some Wave servers. So yeah, fully loaded. No, I could throw some more DSP cards in it. I would love to maybe have the next engine up. I'm starting to tickle towards the top of my channel count, but I've already done one engine upgrade, so it'll be probably a little while before I can probably con people into another engine upgrade. But
nice. We have one here from Mr. Ryan John. Are most of the objects in your immersive mix static? And how many and which objects do you typically move in a snapshot?
Good question. What I use snapshotting, mostly I'm just moving vocals around. My artists on stage are not generally moving in the horizontal field much. So again, tracking or moving that around much. What I am doing a lot of, and this is actually something I really love about immersive, is especially with vocals, whoever the lead vocal is on that particular song, I usually have a snapshot for. I'll pull them forward in the room engine so that they become drier and more, up front in your face. And then for the people that are singing backgrounds, they push back into that. So using MIDI at this point to, S6L snapshots to the L-ISA controller, and then move those, generally try to do it on the L-ISA controller with a little bit of crossfade. So if I miss my mark, I can do it more discreetly. But that's, I'm moving the vocals more in the artificial front to back space. I'm doing that a lot, song to song, or whenever that change makes sense inside the set. And then sometimes too, if I have 2 electric guitars, I'll have them panned out or in the field pretty far on the outsides. If it's one, if I'm switched to one, I'll maybe bring that a little more into center. Again, I'm trying to, as most as possible, reinforce where those people on stage. So when I'm moving a guitar like that, I'm not moving like 10 degrees a little more, just to give it a little more centeredness to it. But I'm really enjoying and really appreciate, again, the trying to make the acoustic or what comes out of the speaker correlate visually with where those artists are on stage.
Yeah, right on.
Awesome. How much has the immersive system changed your mixing workflows?
I'm still learning that. I would say, before I was doing what a lot of people were doing in stereo. So I was, had really a bus-based workflow. I was setting all inputs to groups and then processing them as groups. And then that's also how I was, at that point when I was doing everything from front of house, even with the broadcast, leveraging those stems to, serve whatever need it is. Now, again, I've gone fully, this is where L-Acoustics set me up, and I kind of haven't played veered too far from that. I'm doing everything object based. So that, of course, is a big. So I'm not doing any bus compression on drums and stuff like that. Again, leveraging, I would say, what was a gift from Avid, almost for me doing this. I'm leading in hard to using the, especially these last few weeks of doing the parallel compression, especially on the drums on the individual objects, to get the the tonality or the sound that he kind of is used to with running that through a parallel path on a group. So I would say that's probably the biggest change. And then and then I'd say just being very conscious of hey, is that vocals over there? Is that where it's coming out above them? Just to give a lot of care and detail to that. Because it does, I'd say, I think for the audience, it creates another level of engagement that's now with immersive cheap, so to speak. It's so easy for you to do it that why wouldn't you? And I would say, especially with the spoken word, it definitely increases the amount of engagement to, have those things, visually and from an audio perspective correlate.
John, I'm going to put a little bug in your ear, and I want you to kind of listen for something as you're working through your workflows here, especially when you get to broadcast. I want you to listen for how much impact mixing immersive in the room has on your ambience mics that are going to be used for your stream, right? See how that affects a stereo pair or an XY pair in a stream now, because it should be much more coherent of a recording of that ambience now, because there'd be way less comb filtering in the space now.
Actually, I've already noticed that, because for me to take home every night, I've tried to. It's taken some time to kind of dial this in right, but I do have a pair of mics here at front of house, and then once I got all the timing worked out on that, it was surprising. I can run those. I can put so much more room from the microphones into the mix without it destroying it.
That was my anticipation. I'm glad to hear you.
I've already felt that. On the broadcast side, again, we're still kind of figuring that out or dialing that in to perfection. But I'm sure that will be an awesome side effect when doing it on the 2-bus side of things.
Right. I know just some of the church recordings that I've done in the past. trying to get that audience recorded correctly and have it also be a sense of ambience, man. It's a real challenge in so many of these churches, and primarily just because the phase response of the PA system is so suspect in places.
Yep.
All right. Well, Chant, unless we've got any other burning questions there, that's putting us right on the hour here. I think we probably should try to wrap it up here.
Sounds good.
John, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your experiences with us and what you got going on at Orchard Hill. That's really great stuff there. I'm really excited to see it out in the world and working. I think it's kind of the future of where we're going in sound reinforcement for sure. So thank you so much for your time. I look forward to hooking up with you again and chatting with you some more about this at some point. Thanks for
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll pull the ripcord at this point. Thanks so much for tuning in. You can look for the rebroadcast on the Avid website, I believe. I'm sure there'll be some social media blasts and some email blasts directing you to that. But thank you all for attending today. It's great having a lot of people in the room for this kind of thing. So thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.